Let's get right to Al Roker now with the very latest. Al, who's in the danger zone here?
Well, right now, Lester, everyone from Texas right on into Louisiana has to worry about this. It's 30 miles west of Galveston, 40-mile-per-hour winds moving north at 7. Those flash flood watches extend into Louisiana. We're looking at Imelda pushing slowly inward tonight into tomorrow with heavy rain and thunderstorms. Rainfall rates of up to 1 to 3 inches per hour, and that could be life-threatening flash flooding. Rainfall amounts generally anywhere from 6 to 12 inches of rain, but 18 inches are possible, Lester, so this flash flooding is going to be our biggest concern. Lester?
All right. Al, thanks very much. We'll have more from you shortly ahead in our series, Climate in Crisis. But right now, let's turn to that attack on those oil facilities in Saudi Arabia and mounting evidence tonight that Iran was responsible for the strikes that sent shockwaves through the global oil market. Andrea Mitchell tonight with the new developments.
Tonight, U.S. intelligence indicates the unprecedented attack on Saudi oil fields originated from Iran, using a combination of low-altitude cruise missiles and drones to evade radar. 2 U.S. officials tell NBC News. They say the missiles were fired from at least one location in western Iran. Now, Secretary of State Pompeo is traveling to Saudi Arabia, which U.S. officials say could retaliate against Iran with U.S. support, but without the U.S. firing a shot. After earlier tweeting he was locked and loaded, President Trump Monday said he wants to avoid military conflict.
I don't want war with anybody.
And the military is also cautioning against striking Iran, though it is revisiting a list of possible targets, including oil facilities or Revolutionary Guard missile launch sites. The intelligence is now being shared with senators.
I think the president needs to act now, and he needs to act with partners in a fashion so the Iranians will not do this ever again.
If the president starts a war against Iran to protect the Saudis, I will tell you this, we will file a motion immediately to force this to the floor of the Senate and force there to be a vote.
Tonight, Saudi Arabia says it has restored half of its oil production, much faster than expected. So U.S. analysts are now reducing their predictions of a possible 25-cent per gallon rise in gas prices down to 20 cents. Lester?
Andrea Mitchell in Washington, thank you. There's a real cliffhanger tonight for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu facing voters today with exit polls showing no clear winner. NBC's Bill Neely is there tonight.
Israel's election tonight, too close to call. TV exit polls predicting a dead heat and putting Benjamin Netanyahu's political future in doubt. He campaigned furiously today to remain Israel's prime minister, but his main opponent matched him. Benny Gantz, who once took orders from Netanyahu as his military chief, believes he will replace him. Netanyahu ran as if President Trump was his running mate. Benjamin Netanyahu boasting of his unique relationship and being King Bibi to a deeply divided electorate.
Bibi, go away.
We don't need change. Netanyahu promised voters he'd make more Palestinian land part of Israel. President Trump reluctant to back that.
No, I don't want to be talking about that. It's too soon.
Too soon, too close.
It's a 50-50 election. A lot of people, if you look at the polls and everything else, is going to be very close.
Neither man appears to have a clear path to victory, so it's up to Israel's president to decide who has the best chance of forming a government. And that could take days. Lester?
All right, Bill Neely in Tel Aviv tonight. Thank you. There is breaking health news this evening.
Tonight, 2-time All-Star Pittsburgh Pirates.
Second state in the nation to ban all.
And then it would be up to Iran whether it wanted to admit that it had been hacked.
All right, David Martin at the Pentagon tonight. Thank you. And this strike hit at the heart of the world's oil supply, and that's why America's top diplomat is headed to Saudi Arabia tonight to discuss a possible response. CBS News' Ian Lee is in Saudi Arabia's capital of Riyadh.
Nora, Secretary Pompeo is due in Saudi Arabia tomorrow. He's expected to meet Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in a diplomatic show of support for the embattled country. This comes after that devastating attack on the Saudi oil field and the world's largest crude oil processing plant Saturday that knocked out 50% of the country's production. A senior U.S. official tells CBS News that Pompeo will get the Saudis' view of what they think ought to be done. Saudi Arabia reached out to other countries in the Gulf to find out what they want to do, so the U.S. will get that perspective also. There's also some good news for those at the gas pump. Saudi oil minister said earlier today that the kingdom's oil output was back to pre-attack levels after the country dipped into its strategic reserves. He even said that no deliveries had been disrupted and that damaged facility will be back at full production by the end of the month. Nora?
All right, Ian, on the ground there to do reporting for us. Thank you. Moving on to Afghanistan now. Today, the Pentagon identified the Green Beret who was killed in combat Monday. Sergeant First Class Jeremy Griffin of Greenbrier, Tennessee, was on his 4th deployment. He was 41. His death comes amid an escalating Taliban offensive. Charlie D'Agata is in Kabul, where there were 2 suicide attacks just today.
Packed crowds had gathered outside an election rally for President Ashraf Ghani when a motorcyclist plowed into them and blew himself up, killing dozens. Police told us many victims were women and children. Ghani and his entourage were unhurt and continued campaigning. A second Taliban suicide bomb struck at the heart of America's presence here in Kabul, only around 200 yards from the U.S. Embassy and military headquarters. The Taliban were quick to claim responsibility for today's bombings, which ended the lives of at least 48 people, delivering on a promise to up their attacks after U.S. peace talks were brought to an abrupt end.
Remember, this is a terrorist organization President Trump intended to invite to Camp David to sign off on peace talks, openly claiming responsibility for killing dozens of civilians in the worst attacks since those talks collapsed. Nora?
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. We are hopping around now. I want to go to northeastern Syria. That is where prisons are filled to the point of bursting with foreign ISIS fighters. They hope to return to their home countries, but nobody wants them. In a CBS News exclusive, Holly Williams was given rare access to one of these prisons and spoke with an ISIS fighter from Minnesota.
This is the first time they've allowed a camera crew inside this high-security prison, home to 5,000 ISIS captives, including ISIS leaders and the men who built their deadly bombs, according to the guards.
Hi, are you American?
Of course. It was not where we expected to find a 22-year-old from Minneapolis. Abdel Hamid Al-Marium agreed to tell us his story, but we can't know for sure whether he was speaking freely. He told us he was recruited to ISIS through a contact on Twitter.
He said, "Do you want to speak to someone in ISIS?" I said, "Yeah, of course."
He was bombarded with ISIS propaganda videos, he told us, not the ones showing gruesome beheadings, but explaining that ISIS was helping Muslims. He says he entered ISIS territory in 2015, hoping to become a doctor.
How did they treat you?
Pretty much, they gave me a blank check to buy whatever I wanted.
Did you not know that it was a terrorist organization when you joined it?
To be honest, I was kind of a conspiracy theorist a little bit.
Yeah, but it's a terrorist organization, Abdel. It's a terrorist organization that's carried out attacks.
Here's the thing. People like me that see this, that first of all, don't really believe the news.
You heard him right. He thought ISIS terrorism was fake news. Like many in this prison, he claims he was never an ISIS fighter. Instead, he says he was a victim. He told us he lost his arm in a US airstrike.
Both my legs were broken.
Others here also have terrible injuries. Some are children. But there's no question this is a dangerous place. The guard showed us this attempted prison break from just 4 days ago. They want foreign governments to take their citizens home so they can't escape and rejoin ISIS insurgents. Abdel claims he was interrogated here by FBI agents who said he could face 15 years in prison in the US.
15 years is a very long time for mistakes you made coming to Syria.
So you feel you deserve to be forgiven?
I would say that.
ISIS may have lost control of its so-called Islamic State, but these men have been left behind. And it's often impossible to tell who amongst them is still dangerous. Holly Williams, CBS News in northeastern Syria.
Now we turn to Israel, because tonight's election in Israel could...
Yeah!
It's her name. To him, she was Koki. That's who she was.
Me, and please call me Koki.
Well, I will, but I'm from the South too, so you know how that goes.
Cokie Roberts' father was longtime Congressman Hale Boggs, at one point the majority leader. He was killed in a plane crash, and his wife, Lindy Boggs, would win his seat. Together, Cokie's parents would represent the people of New Orleans in Congress for nearly 50 years. Cokie grew up in the South, but she was also a young witness to history in our nation's capital. It left an impression on her how much the women were really doing.
We watched them run the political conventions, their husbands' offices, their campaigns.
Cokie did consider politics as a young woman, but instead she decided to report on it, to witness it. A student at Wellesley, she met her future husband, Stephen Roberts, at a political meeting in 1962. He was studying at Harvard, a budding journalist himself. They would marry in 1966, and President Lyndon Johnson famously attended their wedding. Cokie's mother, Lindy, actually cooking food for the crowd of 1,500. Along the way, Cokie would remember that first job, anchoring a public affairs program in Washington. She was just 21. It was called Meeting of the Minds.
It was essentially reporting and then writing very brief little stories, and I loved it.
She would become a political commentator for NPR, and in 1988, she would join ABC News.
We're following two major stories tonight.
She would contribute to ABC's This Week, and then co-anchor the program with Sam Donaldson.
What is your definition of womanizing, Sam?
Most women know it when they see it, Senator.
And through the years, every big political night, Cokie was there too. Her interviews with presidents and first ladies. Cokie was an author and historian too, writing more than a half-dozen books, so often telling the untold contributions of women in America. And she wrote a book called We Are Our Mother's Daughters. And she said this not so long ago.
What has been the best piece of advice someone has given you regarding...
Listen to your mother.
Well, that worked out well.
Cokie would win Emmys. She was named a living legend by the Library of Congress. She was cited one of the 50 greatest women in the history of broadcasting. But it was never the awards or the attention. It was family. Her 2 children, Rebecca and Lee, her 6 grandchildren, and her husband of more than 50 years, Stephen. Tonight, the family saying, we will miss Cokie beyond measure, both for her contributions and for her love and kindness. Former President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama calling Cokie a role model to young women at a time when the profession was still dominated by men, a constant over 40 years of a changing world. President George W. Bush and former First Lady Laura Bush writing, she covered us for decades as a talented, tough, and fair reporter. We respected her drive and appreciated her humor. She became a friend. And tonight, Speaker Nancy Pelosi calling her a trailblazer who forever transformed the role of women in the newsroom. And Save the Children tonight, remembering a tireless champion for children. But to all of us here at ABC News, she was Cokie. She made us all better. Her brilliant mind, her sharp wit, but above all, it was her kindness. So true. Later tonight, hear the interview we found today, Cokie in her own words on mothers and their daughters, and how she would like to be remembered. Words we now all treasure, and we're going to share them with you a little later here. There is still much more ahead on World News Tonight this Tuesday. The NYPD officers attacked here in New York City. The shootout when police answer a domestic call. A police body cam image tonight showing the suspect with a gun in his hand. Also had 4 hunters injured in 2 separate bear attacks just hours apart. And we are one-on-one with Alex Trebek tonight. He's revealing a new setback, his candor right here, and what he says keeps him going. His bravery. A lot more news ahead here. Stay tuned.
And the best part, a sleepy man.
Johnson & Johnson is a baby company, but we're also a company.
This is Loma Linda, a place with one of the highest life expectancies in the country.
You see so many people walking around here, and they're hundreds.
So how do you stay financially well for...
The world is in disarray.